Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. So I love the Nintendo 64. Whenever I revisit the console, which I still frequently do, it just takes me back to a time when 3D gaming still felt new and exciting. A game I think really captures the spirit of Nintendo 64, and one of my earliest experiences of 3D gaming is the mystical Ninja Starring Goemon. Originally releasing in 1997 in Japan, Gormon just felt like the right game at the right time. Combining the adventure game elements of Ocarina of Time, the platforming of Super Mario 64, into something that just felt totally unique. Only Gormon appeared shortly after Mario, but before Zelda, and the game's English release showing up mere months before Rare's Banjo-Kazooie. It felt like Gormon was giving you a tiny glimpse as to what was in store for the future. Banjo and Zelda easily surpass it, but there's something about Gormon which has just stuck with me all these years later. Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon is but a small part of a well-established video game franchise that dates back to the arcades of 1986. Ganbare Goemon, I'm probably saying that wrong. The series was steeped in Japanese culture, from its sense of humour, level design, and characters based on various historical figures of Japan, the titular blue spiky-haired Goemon being based on Ishikawa Goemon, a legendary Japanese outlaw perhaps similar to that of Robin Hood, who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Only Goemon met his grisly end by being captured and boiled alive. Charming. Despite there being a great wealth of video games and all kinds of merchandising which I really want and shall never have, very little of Goemon has actually appeared outside of Japan. Developer Konami perhaps felt the series was simply too Japanese for a Western audience to truly understand or appreciate it. Goemon just had this delightful weirdness about it. Konami did try to embrace that weirdness with this very try-hard edgy 2000s advertising, before giving up on the series entirely. But nevertheless, it is a series that simply fascinated me, even though so few of these games released in English. I remember the characters being splashed all over magazine covers, at least they were over here, and with myself slowly getting into the import scene during the early days of the Nintendo 64, the face of Goemon just represented that era. If you knew what a Super Famicom was, you knew exactly what a Goemon, is. We did at least receive Mystical Ninja for the Super Nintendo, a solid and vastly underrated title in the console's library. In fact, a lot of what I love about Mystical Ninja for the Nintendo 64 is fully present here. For the uninitiated, Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon is the series' first foray into the third dimension. Taking place within a wacky depiction of feudal Japan, there were 4 playable heroes, each with their own special abilities. Robot battles that saw you take direct control of a giant mecha, Zelda-style dungeons with light puzzle solving, and just a really fun sense of adventure. Having the vast Japanese countryside stretch out before you felt so sweeping and epic to a younger me in 1998. Konami on Nintendo 64 still had that same level of effort and big production values you associated with the company. There was a high level of effort towards the in-game cinematics, or dynamic camera angles, which made its rather simple boss encounters just feel so much more exciting than they actually were. Goemon and friends still look so lively and animated, despite being very blocky polygonal shapes. Having both Yae and Sasuke visibly slicing their foes in half was certainly a very appreciated visual touch, and the general lighting for some of these locations were just beautiful. There is no day and night cycle, but it just really set the mood and tone. Gormon does still play reasonably well for a 1997 3D game, but it is also very much a product of its time. There is no direct camera control, you have to wait for the camera to readjust itself, you cannot individually target objects or enemies, no Z targeting per se, which can make the combat feel slightly annoying. Most of the time it just feels like I'm flailing my weapons about in nothing. While the mecha battles were pure visual spectacle for me in 1998, arriving just roughly at the end of my Power Rangers obsession, and while that incredible song that plays whenever you boarded your giant mecha still manages to put a big old smile on my face, nowadays I just find these battles to drag on a little bit too long. Unless of course you've learnt some of the special moves, which the game very weirdly doesn't want to tell you about, and will only show you if you completely fill the meter during your robot rampage, or bother to read the manual. While these big, huge environments were breathtaking to me back in 1998, in reality Goemon is a very empty feeling game. There's really not an awful lot to do within this huge world. There are permanent life upgrades to find, which are very easy to find to be honest, coins to be collected as ammo or spent on items, a couple of mandatory minigames, some of which are just awful, but it's a very sparse and empty feeling game world. I think even Zelda's Hyrule Field somehow feels even more populated than the entirety of Goemon. There are just vast sections of straight up nothing, almost deserted looking streets, wide open plains with nothing to find. Checking out some of the early beta screenshots, and it looks as though Goemon was originally to include densely populated towns, before things were obviously heavily scaled back. Perhaps the developers just wanted to add more, but they simply ran out of time, so there are quite a few strange dead ends in this game. But nevertheless, I just find it all so strangely warm and comfortable. There's that early 3D game charm and logic to Goemon. Every area in the game being divided into smaller maps, similar to Zelda, only it somehow feels a little less natural within Goemon. You could say be exploring some underground cavern before finding yourself in the game's next big dungeon, traversing the green Japanese countryside, before opening a door and you're in a vast desert. The game world just doesn't really flow naturally, but I do kinda miss this weird game logic. The blurry textures, the flat sprite-based trees, it's all weirdly beautiful and atmospheric and somewhat unsettling. I think Goemon has some of that liminal space thing going on. So Goemon is dated, but I can still respect and admire the ambition of the original devs. And while it is obviously not the first 3D action adventure, to me this was a totally new experience, from a gameplay perspective and its overall theme. The game being my own personal introduction to Japanese culture. Dare I say this began my obsession with all things Japan. Environments just felt distinctly Japanese. You'll be exploring areas directly inspired by traditional Japanese castles or even kabuki stage plays. I think by far my favourite area in the entire game is the gourmet submarine. It's here where the adventure takes on an almost sci-fi turn. The submarine itself is a food-themed level, having you swim through broth, jumping on platforms made of sushi and riding bowls of ramen. It's just like my Japanese animes. The fortune teller is the best character in the game, by the way. The music of Mystical Ninja was also a huge part of the experience, and it was unlike anything I had heard before in a video game. Utilizing a mix of traditional Japanese instruments such as a shamisen, the soundtrack could also be dynamic, music that gradually changed and became more funkier the further you explored the game's dungeons. There were even 3 fully voiced musical numbers included. Nintendo 64 was a cartridge-based system, so I never really expected it to have CD audio quality like the PlayStation. So those early years of the console really showed that the system was more than capable of having great music or even full voice acting. Switching on Mystical Ninja for the first time and being treated to its fully voiced, seemingly big production value introduction sequence made entirely in-game, this was practically a highlight of the Nintendo 64 for me. But I think what really made the Mystical Ninja experience for me was its humour. The humour is very bizarre and so poorly translated, and I just wouldn't have it any other way. I always got the feel the original translators probably had no idea what they were even translating, trying to make sense of an almost nonsensical story of a pair of invaders piloting a giant mechanical peach that wanted to transform Japan into a Western festival stage. The game is just knowingly silly, with many of its dialogue exchanges accompanied by a laugh track. There are so many moments in this game where I really struggle to make sense of these huge swaths of text. Perhaps most of that humour of the original Japanese script was totally lost in us clueless Westerners. But it certainly encouraged me to want to talk to all of the game's NPCs at least, just to see what ridiculous dialogue they'd say. The main villain, Dancing, deciding to rename Goemon Fernandez, was like the funniest insult for me and my friend. Apologies to anyone named Fernandez. Mystical Ninja is very similar to watching an English translated anime or RPG of the early 90s. For me, it was like finding that bootleg DVD of Trigun, where the subtitles barely made any sense, or my Saturday mornings of watching the English adaptation of Samurai Pizza Cats. So I am glad that I got to experience Goemon in 1998. I can see the flaws, but Mystical Ninja still remains as one of my favourite games on the console. I highly recommend checking it out. I really can't think of anything else quite like Mystical Ninja. Obviously, 3D gaming has come a long way since 97-98, We've seen many an open world adventure, or even games set within heavily stylized or realistic depictions of Japan, but I still haven't played anything quite like Goemon. It's strange how Konami just didn't seem to want to try it again. Well, that's not quite true, there are still other 3D Goemon titles I have yet to play, and we did also see an official English release of Mystical Ninja 2, Goemon's Great Adventure on the Nintendo 64. I cannot think of a more disappointing game from my childhood. Unlike the original Mystical Ninja treating us to an intro sequence with full lyrics, Great Adventure begins with nothing but eerie silence. Well, that's a great way to start a game. At least we have this jamming beat whenever you press start. I did find out that years later the intro sequence had been cut for the English release. I am still deeply upset by its removal. Konami, you advertise this game as being weird and then you just don't commit. What gives? The reason for my disappointment is, well, it's kind of obvious. I just wanted more 3D action adventure, another open world wacky Zelda-like set in Japan, which the sequel is not. It's side-scrolling action platforming, which is fine. Mystical Ninja 2 is actually a return to form for Goemon, playing almost identically to its Super Famicom counterparts. Challenging, fast-paced, arcade-style action platforming with light RPG elements. This is exactly what Goemon was meant to be. 3D Goemon, on the other hand, is almost completely devoid of challenge, focused more so on the RPG adventure game elements, which, as much as I like, I don't think I'd say accurate 3D representation of what Goemon is actually meant to be. I can't help but wonder if longtime fans were just a bit disappointed by it. Mystical Ninja 2 certainly has a lot more going for it. There is more to do in this game world, the adventure elements are better realised. I love the 2.5D visual style. It's very similar to Klonoa on the PlayStation, and even now it's still a great looking game. The music is excellent and it's easily just as good as its predecessor. There was still plenty of humour and there was still a lot of that so bad it's good English going on, but the translation is a noticeable improvement. Supposedly Mystical Ninja 2 is highly regarded amongst the fanbase, and being a side-scrolling platformer, it would surely age far better and be more fun to play than, say, janky early 3D game. Although personally I still don't like it quite as much. I find Mystical Ninja 2 to be very difficult to play for all the wrong reasons. The physics just feel kind of off, and they take some getting used to. Goemon and friends would drop like a rock, making the platforming feel very awkward and kind of annoying. Goemon's Great Adventure is good, and I did have some fun with the co-op mode at the time. The N64 was so starved of side-scrolling platformers anyway, I can only really think of 2 off the top of my head. I do highly recommend checking this game out. Just be forewarned, it is pretty tough. Oh, and is this not the greatest game over screen you've ever seen? We should also mention the modern-day Goemon spiritual successor, Bakeru by Goodfeel, a developer made up of former Konami devs who even worked on the Goemon series. Thankfully it is available now in English with a physical edition available on the Switch. Bakeru is undoubtedly the better game when compared to Mystical Ninja. I mean, of course it is. It has all the advantages of modern gaming, and somehow Bakeru also reminded me of my old Super Famicom import gaming days. It's quite charming. This game is better than Mystical Ninja, no doubt, but I still don't like it as much. Bakeru is still a big old wacky adventure across Japan, but it just lacks the same scope of Mystical Ninja and its grand sense of adventure. The game is separated into levels, and at first there is a really nice variety of different feeling locales, until it starts repeating areas, making you wonder why exactly did Goodfeel make this game so long. This is a game that overstays its welcome. Enemy variety is severely lacking, and the game is just too easy. As much as I still really like Bakeru, it also feels a tiny bit boring. The game was initially released in a much worse state, but it has seen a couple of patches to improve the experience. Bakeru has a lot of potential. I certainly hope Goodfeel follow it up with a sequel one day, but I think in the end I've just come to accept that I will never play a game quite like Mystical Ninja. Like I mentioned at the start, it was the right game at the right time for me, slowly getting into all things anime, having a very keen interest in Japan, and being amazed by the exciting new world of 3D. It's just a bit hard to recreate those feelings now. Maybe we'll never see a sequel, and to be honest that's okay. I've just come to accept a lot of those slightly more obscure games I loved in my childhood just may never return, but I can still appreciate them for what they were or what they meant for me back then. It sure would be nice if Konami at least acknowledged Goemon. I would definitely buy official English releases of the older titles, or putting both of the N64 games on the NSO. Perhaps I can look at more Goemon titles on this channel one day. But for now, if you've made it this far into the video today, thank you ever so much for watching, and I hope I catch you again next time. All the best and take care. Bye!